know the phrase that pays. That's right. Oh, you're reading some fine literature there, sir. Maybe we'll talk about that. Guys, you know what? It's Wednesday. It's 8 p.m. EST. It's your three expert cartoonists. It's Pinch Me, I Must Be Dreaming time. Yes, yes, y'all. Pencil to Pencil was back on your video scope. I'm very excited to be here with you guys. Let's do some intros. My name is JAMAR NICHOLAS. I wear many hats besides this white bucket. I am on the board of the National Cartoonist Society and also the Philadelphia chapter chair. Go Cheesesteaks. Also, on top of all those wonderful things, I am also a graphic novelist. I have a series at Scholastic underneath the graphics imprint. Yeah, tell them Stone Cold. Leon the Extraordinary is the name of my series. The newest book is in stores right now called Leon, Worst Friends Forever. Cop it, why don't you? Guys, I would be remiss. I would be in remission if I did not introduce my cohort, co-conspirator, and co-confidant. Did I say that right? Guys, he is a pioneer of webcomics. Like, you go back to the essence before they even called it webcomics. My man was there. Put respect on his name. He is also the Bill Bixby of this webcomics form, walking to the side of that lonely internet superhighway with the melodic tinkle at his back. He is your friend and mine, Stone Cold Steve Conley. What's up, Steve Conley?
Gentlemen, so good to see you.
Yes.
My name is Steve Conley. I write and draw the webcomic The Middle Age. You can check it out at middleagecomic.com. It's over on Webtoons, Tapas, Go Comics. And I make the TTRPG stuff too. If you play the Dungeons and the Dragons, you can check it out. You can cop it, I believe the kids say.
Yeah, it's cop it.
And I would be remiss if I didn't introduce the Tower of Power, the man of the hour, Too Sweet to Be Sour, who my the one of the facility workers here in my apartment building just said, you know the comics I loved when I was a kid? Man, I just love that Nova. And man, what was that? Darkhawk.
Really?
Just heard that a few just hours ago.
Wow.
We were introduce Mr. Mike Manley.
Wow.
Hey,
Darkhawk's daddy.
I make maintenance workers across America reminisce about their childhood daily.
As they lean on the mop, like Carol
That's right.
Burnett.
Yeah, they're like Darkhawk. Like that one guy was on what was it, Family Ties or whatever, the guy with the sleeves rolled up or whatever. That guy.
Schneiders.
The Schneiders of America.
For one day at a time.
That's
one day at a time. That was it. Yeah.
Well, we're really showing our age, you guys.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm too young to get that reference, Mike.
Yeah, act like you don't know what he's talking about. Guys, welcome back to your favorite live cast brought to you by expert cartoonists in the field. Between the three of us, there's over, I don't even want to count how many decades of experience.
Brought to you by Prel.
And also, but not brought to you by what is that stuff? Just for Men. Is anybody dying? Nobody dies their show business anymore, do they? I hope not.
No, I'm not dying my show business. So I should though. I should. Then I'd be nice and smooth.
So, guys, we're going to kind of get right into it. Usually, we do a lot of banter at the beginning. One, because we kind of like start to grease the wheels a little bit, and get you guys ready for the conversation ahead. We're going to try to jump right into it because our guest tonight is on deadline, like we all are. So we'll keep it moving tonight, and I hope that you're excited to talk to him as well. Hold on, I got to find my media. Hold on one second, guys. Cully Hamner's here. What? Henry says, oh man, one of the greatest artists in comics today. Can't wait. I think Cully's blushing in the green room, so it might not be green anymore. Yeah, I'm very excited to bring Cully in. I've been chasing him down for a long time to have him on. And I want to talk about the things that not necessarily embarrass cartoonists, but, we're getting up there speaking about being gray and talking about things that might make us not feel good. Like, oh man, he's a legend. Oh man, he's an icon. Oh man, remember when you did that thing and I was 6? Oh man, don't.
Remember when I threw up on my daddy's back and I was looking at your comic? My dad was burping me.
we're but humble cartoonists, so we're just here for your entertainment.
We're just burpers.
We started learning our vertebrae by number. Or like, oh no, which one went out? Which one went out?
Is that C6? Which one is that? We're gonna have a good time tonight, so let's waste no more time. Let me get my assets together. Cully, you're on deck. Please welcome to the mothership, Cully Hamner. Ping! Cully, you've been rendered.
Hello, I'm rendered.
I just rendered you. Hello, how are you?
You called Steve the lonely man of comics.
Steve,
are you really that lonely?
It wasn't until JAMAR said that. Now I'm like feeling like really despondent. So I'm gonna need a minute.
I'm just saying.
I don't know how that came up. How do we get to? Well, we'll deconstruct that at some point. How I read Bill Bixby.
Yeah, the Bill Bixby of webcomics. But yeah, Cully, thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
Ever since Mike and I started this project, there's always kind of like a laundry list in the back of my head of people I'd love to talk to. And I'm happy that you were receiving it, because something that I've learned along the years of being a personality, so to speak, is that not everybody likes doing this stuff, right? Not everybody likes doing interviews.
Like interviews and talking to people, and
or showing your face on a video scope. You know what I mean? So I think when I first started asking people, and people were like, no, I'm good. It kind of threw me off guard.
I feel like that's kind of part of the gig nowadays, though, right? I mean, not just doing like video stuff or like doing interviews, but just having a public face for conventions, and I think there's always like that kind of like part of the gig,
Yeah, I mean, because let's face it, if you're not promoting yourself, the companies are not promoting you. You maybe
for sure.
If you're that 1% of people that they're pushing in that one big special project. But
absolutely. Well, and also, I mean, like, especially, at the big two, very often, part of the marketing plan is for them to say to you, okay, now share this on your socials and that, they don't necessarily set up interviews for you. I mean, there've been times when they have, but like for the most part, they kind of don't, unless you're, like you said, one of their top 1% of creators who are on exclusive, but most of their creators aren't, but yeah, I mean, like I don't know. I sort of feel like I've always been a little bit of a self-starter when it comes to that sort of thing. But I also think it's there's something to having kind of a relationship with the people who are fans of your work, and it may not be a personal relationship, but it is a relationship, and I think it's in your interest to make sure that they, that they like what you do and they like you, and I don't think it's ever in anybody's interest to be a dick to the fans. It's like.
Although there are some, I have witnessed.
But it's not in their interest, is it? I mean, it's like, I don't know. I like talking to fans. I like meeting people, whether they're comics fans or not. I just generally like meeting people or talking to people I don't know. So it just sort of plays into that. But yeah, I feel like that's part of the gig.
Yeah, I think so. I think especially now, because our fans are like a little continent of people that like our work, that grew up with our work, that are following us. That's like a little piece of time that's moving along with us.
Yeah.
And that's not being replaced by the 12-year-olds or the 10-year-olds coming in to follow you now.
Yeah.
Basically guys with gray hair.
Yeah, but you know what? I got to tell you this. I mean, like, my experience like a year or two ago with the Blue Beetle movie, I met a lot of kids who were into Blue Beetle, a lot of kids. And, because I did a couple of things where like I hosted a screening here in Austin for the movie. And my convention experience from then on has had a lot more kids than I'm used to having. So that was pretty cool. And maybe that particular character appeals to kids more than other things that I've done. Haven't met a lot of 9-year-olds who liked red, but But Blue Beetle, there's an appeal there for kids that does seem to kind of like, maybe it comes from cartoons, maybe it comes from toys, probably so, and that movie, but like it's, they are somewhat aware.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where kids get hooked now.
Yeah, they do, and they sometimes find their way into comics that way.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting is if you look at all the people who've been doing Batman for the past 10 years or so at DC, you talk to them about how they got into Batman, I would say 9 times out of 10 it's because of the animated series.
Yeah.
It's an ecosystem. That's just kind of how it works.
Oh, you'll like this one, Cully. Henry from YouTube says, "I forgot you did Red. That's my dad's favorite comic."
Yeah, there you go. Well, hats off to your dad.
That's fantastic.
Do you like doing the conventions? Is that a fun part of the gig?
Yeah, I mean, I was really disappointed to have to like sort of kind of bail on my first con of the year, which was supposed to be C2E2, but I got sick. But I love doing conventions. It's like a lifeline for me because I mean, all of us, we work in our spare bedroom or our den or whatever, and we don't really see human beings.
It's lonely.
Yeah,
it's lonely.
It is.
You're like the Maytag repairman always said. It's like
in more ways than you know.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something, Mike? I was going
to say. So, what is your next show?
My next show is MomoCon in Atlanta, Georgia. I haven't been to Atlanta in a while. Like I lived in Atlanta for 20 years when I was with Gaijin, and I moved here to Austin about 10 years ago. So I haven't been back to Atlanta in any kind of meaningful way, probably in 5 years or something like that. So it's going to be kind of interesting to be back. So I'm doing that. I think right after that, I've got, I probably have like, Fan Expo Dallas and Heroes Con and San Diego and New York and Baltimore.
I was going to ask, do you run that whole trench every year, or do you kind of?
There are a few shows that I do every year. I always do Heroes.
Yeah.
I always do Baltimore. Very, very seldom do I not do those. And usually there's some sort of an extenuating circumstance, for me to not be there. But that couple of shows I pretty much always do. I try to do New York every year. I went like a long time without doing San Diego. I went like 8 years without doing San Diego, and I did it last year and had a really good time. So I'll be back this year.
Yes. San Diego is a lift. It really is.
Yeah. But I mean, it was nice seeing everybody that I don't often get to see. I only kind of do West Coast cons, and I just had forgotten how big and tiring it is. And but my con experience is actually a lot better than it used to be because like I'm part of this whole collective of artists called Essential Sequential.
Right.
And they pretty much kind of take care of everything. Like they set up the backdrop, the table, they lug all my art and, all that kind of stuff. And I really just kind of have to show up and sit down, and it's I don't handle money or anything like that. I just basically, I just show up and just do the show. And it's just made my con experiences a lot more pleasant.
That's great.
Yeah. It's from being in my new world, I've been in the traditional book space for a while.
Yeah.
That's kind of how that stuff works. Like your day is real short. It's like, okay, we're flying you out here and you have a signing from 1 to 2. Then we'll see you tomorrow.
It's not quite like that. I tend to stay at the table all day, but there was one year DC brought me out for New 52 back when we were doing all that, because I designed like a lot of characters for that. And it was a last minute thing. So I didn't have Artist Alley space or any of that kind of stuff. And they brought me out and I had that sort of thing. I had like my signing from 1 to 2 and then a drawing demo from 3 to 4 or whatever. And then I was actually able to kind of walk the show, which I never do. And I was able to like go back to the hotel and take naps. Which,
Wait, what?
That was a new one on me,
Something that you never get to see at a convention.
Yeah.
I'm just resting my eyes.
Right.
Yeah. Well, San Diego is definitely that's, and I haven't been to New York in decades now, a New York show, but yeah, I mean, you really have to pace yourself, and then you also have to pace yourself because you have the time to get ready for a show, and then the time to try to catch up on your deadlines.
Yeah. I mean, believe me, I've done that working in the hotel room thing. That's that's you already don't have energy from being at the con.
Right.
And New York Comic Con's bigger than it's ever been. It's like close to San Diego at this point. It's in terms of the number of people that are there, and it's just it's a real it's a race.
Cully, I wanted to ask you about since we're talking about cons, about your con matrix. Like, I'm sure you're announcing ahead of time that you're coming to a show.
Yeah,
do you have commission lists that you start before you get there, and how does that work for you?
What I generally do is I rarely start the list. Like, I rarely start drawing before I get to the convention, but I'll take a list ahead of time so people can get on my list. They can go to the Essential website and get on my list easily. But generally, I mean, whatever I'm working on, I tend to be working on right up until I leave for the con. So when I'm at the con itself, I mean, I'm pretty diligent. I'm generally pretty fast with the commissions. So I don't really, I once in a while I'll leave with one or two that I have to mail out, but very rarely at this point. I usually get through all my list. I usually cut the list off at a certain point too. Right. Yeah. So I generally know how much I can do.
Right. And I know a lot of guys who, I mean, not for fans don't really think about it this way, but that is a long stretch of road to have your head down drawing for 3 or 4 days straight.
I have to tell you, I mean, I've had this conversation with a couple of other artists that are kind of our generation, where we're like, how much longer is it viable to do commissions at conventions? Because I don't do, I'll do a quick sketch, I'll do a remark or something like that on something but generally my commissions are fairly involved. I don't like to skimp on the commissions, so it's like I wonder how long I'll be able to do sort of the full commissions that I do. I might at some point pare that down to, just doing headshots or that sort of thing. But right now I'm still going to do them, but you never know.
Yeah.
We
talked about that. Well, I think that one of the things that seems to be developing is the sequential guys that you're part of. So you can talk a little bit about that, because it seems now what's happening, we're getting into the era, and it's probably, I also think, due to the age of our fan base, where it's they can go and buy a nice piece of art. It's not, the mystery is removed. They can find people. It's a nice second source of income, which is always good. Yeah. And you also get international people that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you hook up with those guys?
I've been with them for about, I want to say probably 10 or 12 years at this point. I think 11 years. I was friends with Dave Johnson, and Dave was already kind of part of that group, and I knew Jason, the Jason Schachter, who kind of runs the whole thing. I'd known him for a little while anyway, and I had an art dealer that was a good friend of mine that had just decided not to do it anymore. Just didn't want. I don't know if you guys know Randy Martin at all. Randy is Laura Martin's husband, and Laura's the colorist that one of my favorite colorists in the world. And so Randy was repping me for a little while, and he just kind of got to the point where he didn't want to do it anymore. So I sort of reached out to Dave, and I said, do you think Jason would be interested in taking me on? And he was. So I just I sort of slid right into the situation there, and I've been there for, like I said, over a decade. And in a lot of ways, as far as the convention experience is concerned, it kind of it sort of reminds me of when I was with Gaijin, you know, back in the day, like having a nice kind of a gang to be with at a convention, you know, good group of friends. And, you know, there's always somebody that's got a dinner going on, you know, and that sort of thing. And it's a lot of fun, a lot of good people, you know, to spend time with at a convention. So it's made things very enjoyable, you know, and Jason and his partner Mo, they know how to run this thing. They've got it, you know, pretty well down to a science at this point, and they manage all the personalities well, and you know, it's all good. So
is it now just you bring your art supplies, some paper, and
yeah, pretty much.
That's awesome.
Yeah, pretty much. And you know, I'll get to the table. My portfolios are already laid out with the originals in them and stuff. And you know, like I am still holding on to ink and paper. Like I part of my process is digital, but it tends to be in the construction part, like, you know, layouts and that sort of thing. But when I get to doing the pages, they tend to be, you know, classic kind of full-sized original pages, you know, like you're used to seeing. And that's, you know, that, like you said, Mike, that's sort of a nice side income, you know. I just like the tactile experience of drawing on paper, period. Yeah. And I've tried it digitally and it's fine, but I just like paper and I like the smell of ink and like all that stuff. So
when you're doing the digital prelim or rough sketch or whatever, figuring it out, what programs are you using?
Just Photoshop. I mean, I don't do the the other programs that people are using a lot nowadays. I'm pretty much a Luddite when it comes to that sort of thing. I'll just do it in Photoshop and usually print a very light kind of a blue layout on the board and then just start drawing on top of the board.
That's cool. That's great.
So you did actually experiment with doing everything digitally for a while?
I have, yeah. I mean, you know, it's just, there's just a weird disconnect with my brain or whatever. And it's just like, thank you, Roger. That got me through lockdown too. There's just a weird disconnect with my brain and drawing like doing finished art digitally. I don't know what that is. And I'm sure there's a learning curve and I could get through it. And clearly a lot of people do things digitally. One of my old studio mates, Brian Stelfreeze, when he's doing interiors is totally digital at this point.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
You wouldn't be able to tell. I mean, his stuff has got just that sort of organic feel to it, but he's totally digital. You know, if you look at any of the interior stuff that he's done the last, I don't know, probably 10 years, it's all digital.
And Adam uses a lot of digital, right? I mean, Adam's a beast. I mean, he draws, you know, he works things out as far as I know in his sketchbooks still. But you know, it's I don't think he's changed the way he works. From what I understand, he still uses a mouse. You know, I mean, when he does his coloring, his style is sort of dependent on that sort of style. Maybe he's changed. Maybe he started using like a Cintiq or a tablet or a stylus or something. I don't think so. I think he's still coloring like the way he's always colored. And you know, he'll do like these detailed pencil drawings and then scan them. Hey, and and then, you know, work from there. I wanted to touch a little bit on when you were in the studio with the guys.
Yeah.
So was there some cross-pollination like that when you were like watching somebody else?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Cause we were the earliest couple of studios that we had were like a bullpen. So there was no separation. We were all in each other's company, like all the time. And sometimes, you know, somebody would pull something off and we'd all gather around their table to check it out, you know, and some people would be like, oh man, that's great. And, you know, other people would be like, you son of a bitch. Now I've got something to beat, you know, and there was some competitiveness there. But, you know, it was a really cool way to learn the craft, you know, because we were all young. Some of us were a little older, a little more experienced than others. The kind of two kind of anchors of the studio were Brian and Adam, who were they were kind of at opposite ends of the spectrum. Because I feel like we were a spectrum of like styles. Like we all had sort of similar approaches. I've heard people say that we had a house style, and I don't agree with that at all. I don't look at Adam and then look at Dave Johnson or Jason Pearson,
sure,
or Tony Harris or Joe Phillips, or or Brian, and say that they're similar at all, because I just don't think that any of us are, especially as we've gotten older. But at the time, I just didn't see it. I think that we influenced each other's approaches. If somebody, was suspected of being a little too influenced by somebody else, we were pretty ruthless with each other.
Oh, really?
We were like a pack of wolves, man. It was something to behold. But through all that though, it's like we're all still in contact. We all still, see each other at cons and stuff, and it's cool, where it's like having another family.
Cully,
why did it end? Did you guys just decide like the Beatles?
There were a number of factors. I mean, you have to understand that. I mean, it ended after 19 years.
It's a long time.
We had that studio for a long time.
It's a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, and it ended because people get older, they start moving away, having families, buying houses. It got a little too expensive, I think. And I think people just kind of wanted to do their own thing after a while. But I mean, it's amazing how long we kept that place together. I was there from 1992 to 2010.
Wow.
So yeah, good like 18 years I was in that studio. I mean, never left. I was just there. The only person that was there longer than me was Carl Story, and I were tied because he left for a year and then came back.
Mm-hmm.
But Brian Stelfreeze and his partner Steen Walsh, they were there for the full 19 years.
Wow.
So we were just short of 20 years.
Cully, I have some questions about the studio, because I'm very fascinated with American comic book artists who are also kind of in a commune, right? That doesn't happen a lot because we're all very kind of solitary. Yeah. So I think about Gaijin, I think about our buddy Mike Norton, who's running 4-Star and
Artemis.
Artemis, yeah. And Helioscope. There's not that many.
Going strong,
Yeah, there's not that many places.
Rain Studios in Canada. That's another good one.
So I wanted to ask really quick if you can remember, kind of like, what were the kind of day-to-day mechanics of that? Like, was somebody the collecting the rent checks?
Yeah, and at different times it was different people. When Steen was still in the studio, you know what? I shouldn't say Steen was there for the full 19 years, because she did leave. I think because she got tired of collecting the rent. Because it's kind of a pain in the ass, like you collect the rent, and yeah, I mean, like there was generally somebody had like office manager responsibilities, and there was several different people. It was me for a little while. But yeah, somebody always had that job. It was somebody's job usually to print out bills for everybody and all that sort of thing, and do all the accounting. We had a studio accountant, but that was mainly for taxes and stuff like that at the end of the year. But yeah, the mechanics were, like somebody was kind of like the office manager, and that went around. But generally, we all just, we all paid our fees, and we had our cube, and later on we all had private offices, and you just come in and get to work. But obviously it wasn't all work. I mean, we all, like, I always joke about the fact that Stelfreeze and I were the people the two that would come in the earliest. And for a while there, I would just pick him up every morning, and we would roll into the studio. But like, I get in, he'd make his tea, I'd make my whatever, bowl of cereal or whatever, and because we had a kitchen in the studio and all that, and I'd go in my office and sit down, and you start mentally preparing to work, and I'd hear Brian coming down the hall, and I knew he was going to come in and flop down on my couch and want to talk for a while. So I was like, do I close the door before he gets here? Or do I allow him? Because he would come in and we'd have these really creative discussions, and it usually ended up being a good thing for me to kind of like have that give and take. And he and I always like, we're really in sync about a lot of things, and we would have these really amazing creative discussions. So generally I would leave the door open and he would flop down on the couch with his hot tea, and we would we would talk for an hour.
Yeah.
Or we'd go on a walk. A lot of times we would walk around the office complex, whatever office complex we were in at the time. And we would just, talk about our ambitions, or we would talk about like, how you're going to handle a certain project, and invite comment from the other person. How do you think I should do this? And that was always good. It was always cool. And we all did that for each other, but Brian and I in particular, for some reason, the two of us were always kind of close that way.
When you say early, how early are we talking in the morning?
I usually, when I used to pick up Brian, we would get in at 7 a.m.
Wow. Okay.
When I stopped doing that, we would both kind of like, hey, Susie, we would both get in by about 9, start working by about 10, but we would also be there until midnight sometimes, like, it was really easy, especially, at the time, for a long time I was unattached while I was at the studio. So it was kind of really easy to kind of like look at your watch and go, oh, hey, it's 9 o'clock. Why am I still here?
Right. Was there anybody that did a graveyard shift? Like, the assumption is everybody is there in daylight, but did anybody fall in at 11?
Especially when we were all young. I mean, we did all-nighters all the time. Yeah. And usually that's when like the hijinks would happen. Like, because Dave Johnson was an amateur fireworks maker. And we had like this warehouse space, and behind the warehouse space was the train tracks. And, Dave would he would buy a bunch of fireworks and he would break them all apart. He would mix them up in glass vials like an idiot. I don't know why he would do this. And we would all gather like at 4 a.m, behind pieces of plywood while he set it off.
Sounds like a Batman villain.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes he would take like like PVC pipe and like jam dirt in one end of it, and like put his homemade bottle rockets in these things and like try to hit the trains as they go by. So
he is a Batman villain.
Yeah,
trains.
So it was a lot of that kind of stuff. A lot of the sort of thing where we were like, how did we not hurt ourselves? Because there were plenty of times like I would look at the other side of the plywood and there would be glass sticking out of it. He essentially would make bombs. But this is all when we're in our 20s. It's like, and we're all there trying to get stuff in, and it was, there was we had friends that used to call it the honeycomb hideout because we were just always there and we were always getting into shit, and that sort of thing. So
now it's funny because that's unusual in comics that you have now, not in the 40s or the 50s.
Yeah.
But in animation, people are used to going in and artists working together because that, animation is like a factory.
Yeah.
But it's rare in comics to have groups of 4, 5, 6.
It's rarer than ever. I mean, like I've noticed. There have been a lot of times, and I've groused about this, and I don't want to seem like I'm like an old dude or whatever, but I've noticed that there are people who build themselves as studios who don't live in the same city, and basically a lot of times they'll just keep Zoom open, while they're all working at their homes. And I mean, that's cool. I think that's fun. I don't think it's the same thing because we genuinely enjoyed each other's company, for the most part. I mean, obviously we had our fights, and that sort of thing, but we were all in there every day with each other. And, there's a particular kind of energy that comes from seeing each other every day, and magic happens. I feel the same way about like, you look at DC Comics right now, for the longest time, or during COVID, like everybody was kind of working from home. And eventually, they closed that office that they had in Burbank. They've since now started work at another office, but it's more of like a hot desk kind of a situation. So nobody's got their own dedicated little offices really. And me personally, I feel like something's kind of lost, because I remember in 2019, I was in LA for an extended period, and they were still in their first Burbank office, and they allowed me to work there for like a month. They just gave me a cube, and I went into DC every day and worked. And I can't tell you how many times like somebody would pull me into a room or something and say, "What do you think about this?" Or I got a couple of projects out of it, or I would weigh in on things, and it was really fun. It reminded me of being in the studio, and that's, I think, there's something that's lost when nobody works at the same place.
Well, that's going back to like the old Marvel bullpen,
Yeah.
When I got in, DC had a bullpen, but Marvel really had the bullpen. And every time you would go in, you would meet people, you would see stuff.
Yeah.
You would pick up work, you would share ideas.
A more modern kind of equivalent to that would have been the CrossGen situation. There were some differences, of course, but I mean, it was the same sort of thing. There are a lot of friends of mine now who were at CrossGen who talk about it so fondly, and they bond over the fact that they were all there and they all dealt with the same good stuff and bad stuff, and people would come in, like you said, people would come into town and they'd come to the CrossGen offices, and that was always cool. It was the same at Gaijin. Like somebody would come into town and they would come over to the studio and hang out. We got to be good friends with Chris Sprouse that way. Mike Oming is another person that used to hang out at the studio here and there. It was just a cool environment,
Yeah.
Probably not exactly like the Marvel experience, but that was kind of my, my version of that, I guess.
Yeah. I think the one thing that hurts the industry as a whole is that you don't have that hub of the young and the old, the veteran and new people.
The institutional knowledge doesn't get passed around the same way that it used to. I think that's true with freelancers. I think it's true with editorial in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's harder for the institutional knowledge to get passed down from the old to the young.
Right. Yeah.
Cully, I have one more mechanic question about studios, and we'll move on. At any point, did you have, like, I don't know, seconds? Like, were there interns or apprentices?
Absolutely.
Around? Can you talk about that?
In Atlanta, we had SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design. So I'd say probably in the early 2000s or so, we started getting interns from SCAD. Mm-hmm. And a number of them have gone on to have, like, viable careers, and it was a really cool experience to kind of be in that sort of like a mentorship position, because I had a couple of mentors before I went into comics. I had a guy named Don Howard who lived in my hometown, who was an ex-Disney character designer that lived in my hometown, that I assisted him for a while. And then when I got to Atlanta to Gaijin, it's like all of your mentors are also your contemporaries. So, all of us in the studio, I looked at Brian for the first few years I was in the studio, like he was up here, like he was, it at times felt like he was 10 years older than me, 15 years older. He's really not. He's we're a lot closer in age than we used to be. That makes sense. But it took a while for us to kind of become contemporaries, even though we had kind of always really were, because Adam and Brian were the ones with, and Carl were the ones with all the experience. They'd been around a few years when I broke in. It seems like a long time, but it was probably, you're talking like 3 or 4 years, tops. But yeah, and so to kind of move into that position of mentoring somebody who's in school to become a comic book artist was a very interesting experience. But we had that from probably early to mid, probably 2002 or 3, all the way up until the end of the studio.
Wow.
And the reason I asked you about that is there's also the idea that not every artist is equipped to have help, or even want to receive that. You know, so
I
did
think
anybody
there's levels. Like, you know, you look at Brian. Brian is like one of the most gifted teachers I've ever met, right? Like he can stand in front of a classroom. He can do one-on-one. He has got so much knowledge to impart in such an engaging way of doing it. I'm much better one-on-one. Like I'm a good mentor for one person. You put me in front of a classroom and, you know, or a group, I'm probably not quite as effective. I get a little stage fright, you know, that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, not everybody's got the temperament. There's no way I would want to teach in a classroom or, you know, mentor like a large group or anything like that. But I'm perfectly comfortable, you know, with one or two people, sort of imparting whatever I can give to them. I'm happy to do it. I'm very much like a believer in pay it forward, because people did that for me.
So in modern times, Cully, do you ever reach out for an intern or anything like that now that you had that taste?
No, it's been a while. It's been a while, mainly because I'm just kind of not set up to have an intern.
Yeah.
The way things are right now, and also just you know, being in this house that we're in and everything, there's just always, you know, I'm having to kind of like sort of redo my schedule all the time. Like, you know, it's like something's always coming up that I have to take care of. And I just, you know, I just do everything myself. You know, I've had assistants. There were a couple of holdovers from our days at the studio that continued doing things like, you know, filling in blacks for me and stuff like that. But for the most part, no, I don't have any assistants nowadays. That might change.
How was that adjustment going from that studio environment in Atlanta? Then when you moved away, was it like did you immediately try to find another group of people, or were you?
It sucked. I mean, it was pretty bad. I spent the entire first, I don't know, probably like 19 years of my career, almost 20 years, because, you know, I guess there was a year or so before I moved into the studio that I worked at home. But like most of my career at that point had been working in a group. That's what I was used to. I was used to having kind of that creative, like, sort of spark floating around from other people. And then suddenly, you know, we had planned to close the studio, and we did. And then I was working in a spare bedroom at home and just hating life. I mean, it was just the worst. And what we did was Laura Martin and I and a guy named Jeremy Dale, who is no longer with us. He passed away about I don't know, probably about 10 years ago now. The three of us all rented individual offices, but in the same building, in the same hallway. So it was kind of the effect of having a studio again.
Right.
So we would all see each other every day, and that was pretty cool. We did that until I moved to Austin. And I think they kept doing it for a little while after that. But yeah, once I moved to Austin, it was like, well, you know, we bought a house. I can't really justify the expense of having an outside office anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm just, I better get used to this, you know, and, you know, I make it work.
Before we run out of time, Cully, because where does the time go, right? Can you want to talk about Hollywood a little bit? Because I know people are always interested in kind of.
I don't know what you want me to say. The Hollywood experience for comic book artists is kind of the same experience, you know, for not having a Hollywood experience. I mean, it's like, you know, people buy the rights to something and then they go away and they make it, and, you know, maybe you go to the premiere or get a set visit, but for the most part, this is my Hollywood experience right here. So,
well, that's the reason I asked, because I think there's a lot of romanticizing of it when it's really just like something else you probably have to deal with.
Look,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's some cool stuff about it. I mean, you do get, you know, a little field trip here and there, and that's pretty cool. And you know, when something hits, yeah, me too. Jeremy was a really good.
He was a good
really missed.
Yeah.
My experience, you know, when you get the money from it, you know, the money is nice. You know, I'm not gonna complain about that. You know, when we sold Red, we got paid well, and that was pretty cool. But you know, you might get you might get to go out and, like, I spent a week on the set for Red. hang out with the actors, got to do a press day with them, and that was pretty cool. I don't know. I feel like it's kind of what you make of it. And I also feel like a lot of times, I'll hear artists complain about how ignored they are by the process. And I agree that the kind of tendency is to go, well, the writer is the creator and the artist works for the writer, which is not the case, right. Especially with a creator-owned book. I mean, that was something we created together, we owned together. And I always try to explain it in terms of like, you're not buying the script that they wrote, you're buying the comic that was printed. And I did half that. I created that with Warren. So, but I also feel like a lot of artists kind of accept that a little too readily. They allow themselves to be ignored. And I especially on like that first Red movie, I was a squeaky wheel when it came to promoting that thing. And I don't think they knew quite what to do with me at first. And they were like, because, there was at one point, like they were going to leave me out of the San Diego, like the holiday experience and all that. And, I made a stink about it. And I was like, you're not going to leave me out of this. And, to Warren's credit and to DC's credit, they both kind of backed me up and they were like, yeah, you're not going to leave him out of this. This is his thing too. Because I think there's a lack of understanding about the kind of symbiosis between writer and artist in comics, because it's pretty unique. There are not a lot of things, like that. In Hollywood, there's an art department that works on a film that's, they're doing a lot of creation, but they're not considered the creators of the film. The creators of the film are the director and the writer and the, people who originate the idea.
Right.
And it's not the same with a comic. But comic is, when people equate comics and film like they're so similar, it sets my teeth on edge because they're really not. Yeah. There's some mechanical equivalency with certain things, like angles and and some of the decisions that you make creatively, but they are not the same animal at all. They're very, very, very different. And it drives me crazy when people get into the who's the director of a comic book argument. Well, there's nothing that drives me crazier than that.
People look at Stan Lee and they think that he made the drawing, the average person.
I know. I've seen cartoonist Stan Lee like I don't know how many times. I'm like, no, it didn't work like that. Especially the way he wrote. The artist was more involved in what Jack Kirby created a lot more than people realize. Steve Ditko created a lot more than people realize. I personally, I like working plot style. I think that's kind of a lost art. Yeah. Not that I don't mind working from scripts, and there are plenty of writers who say, look, if you want to change something, change it. They're perfectly fine with that, but they'll still write a full script. And I always kind of have like my attitude is like the Hippocratic Oath. I don't want to do any harm to what they wrote, but I do feel like there's, I feel like when you get a plot, it just sort of invites you to create more than you would get from a full script. That's just, it's again, the way my brain works, but I don't know. I maybe have lost the plot of what the question was, but
well, no, you answered it just kind of what I was looking for.
Yeah, I think that getting back to it, I think that a lot of times artists tend to be kind of the less vocal, of the creative partnership, and they kind of let themselves be shut out of the process. And maybe we shouldn't. We should make some noise, and we should try to educate people as to the fact that when you read a comic, you're reading the art. You're not just reading the words. You are reading the art. The reading experience is a visual one.
Yeah.
And any writer in comics who's got any experience will tell you that that's the truth. Right. When they write their script, they're not writing the script for the audience. They're writing it for the artist to interpret for the audience.
And every artist is going to interpret it a little bit differently.
It's exactly right. You put somebody else on Watchmen than Dave Gibbons, it is absolutely not the same book.
Right. Yep. I want to see Gene Colan's Watchmen.
That would be something.
Yeah.
All right,
Or
Cully.
Steve Ditko's Watchmen.
Yeah, I like that. So, Cully, there's a couple of questions, and like I said, we're going to stay honest tonight. This is what we call in the room the lightning round. Ka-chow.
Lightning round. All right.
So this will be breezy. There's like 1 or 2 questions, and Steve is going to ask you questions, and you will answer them, and we'll get you out of here.
All right, cool.
All right.
And so first one we got from J. Robert Deans. Hello, JRD, over on YouTube. And this might have been touched on with the pyrotechnics before, but what's the 1 or 2 book you? You edited the questions, Jamar. You got me right between this. Sorry about that.
That's why the producer.
Yeah, beautiful. Cully,
Right.
what's the 1 or 2 books you pull off the shelf when you need a boost of inspiration? When you
Let's see. Walt Simonson's Thor is a favorite of mine. Always love that. I mean, I've got it right here. It's like
There
right
it
next.
is.
I don't know if I can sort of name as quite as many comics. A lot of times I'll just pull.
Leon, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. No, I'll pull art books down. I'll I don't get inspiration just from comics, and I think that when you're doing comics, you do yourself a disservice by just looking at comics. I look at a lot of stuff. I look at I obviously look at comics. I look at art books. I look at movies. I read just books. A lot of my sensibility is informed by things like Twilight Zone or a golden age of television, TV plays, and just lots of weird stuff, radio dramas of all things. Just it's all storytelling. But as far as comics are concerned, I mean, obviously the ones that Batman Year One, anything David Mazzucchelli did, I was huge into. American Flag.
Wow.
Stuff like that.
That's great. Thank you for the question, JRD. Bill O'Donnell on Facebook asks, question for Cully. Do folks ask for color pieces from you? By the way, your grayscale is great.
Thank you. Not really. I mean, like I color my own covers, but that's digital. It's like I don't tend to do a lot of color stuff physically. I don't know what the reason for that is. I'm much more comfortable with value studies than I am with coloring with like markers or coloring with like watercolors or acrylics or anything like that. It's been a long time since I've really painted. I think when I got into comics, I was learning to paint. Like I said, I was an assistant to an ex-Disney guy, and he was teaching me to paint. And I was coming along. Then I got into the comics thing, and it's just like a marathon of doing black and white work. Especially at the time, not a lot of guys that did what I did were coloring their own work. You had like Mike Holden and people like that. But for the most part, you're just trying to get pages out the door, and you just get in that habit. So it's something that I should do. I should try to reapproach that. But I'm probably pretty lacking in my physical color skills at this point.
Thank you for that question, Bill. Studio Sky Tiger on YouTube. Cully, what was your thinking when you designed Jamie, Blue Beetle, and Duke Thomas?
Well, 2 different kind of like trains of thought, really. With Blue Beetle, it was a situation where, and I've told this story probably many times, but they had a script, and they had gone to like a few different artists and sort of solicited designs from them, and they had a set of instructions, which is that they wanted it to look sort of like a Japanese robot kind of a style, and they weren't getting what they wanted. And it's I don't think through any fault of any of the artists that they were using, who were all great, but they were following the instructions. And by the time that Chiarello came to me and said, "Hey, you want to take a swing at this?" He told me that that's what they were looking for, and he's like, "We're just not getting what we want." I'm like, "Because you're not telling them what you want. You're telling them what you think you want, right?" And I was like, none of your instructions are actually coming from the character. So the character is a Mexican American kid who lives in El Paso, why are you trying to force Japanese culture onto this character's design? Why don't you do some things that are a balance between the beetle part of it, you know, looking at actual beetles, like in the National Geographic or whatever, and do something that's more reflective of kind of like a Mexican style design ethic. So what I did was looked at a lot of pictures of beetles, which is where the kind of like the shape came from with these the pincers on the backpack and everything, because I think a character, the best character designs are based around an interesting shape. You know, the silhouette of Batman anytime you see it.
And those are so easily identifiable. They're great.
Right. And then I saw pictures of beetles that had these sort of projections coming off of them. And I don't know, I thought that was a really cool shape.
Yeah.
I don't know how it became a backpack. That was just, where basically it looks like it's a big beetle just hanging onto his back, and it essentially forms a backpack. That was blind invention. That just came from nowhere. Right. But then I thought, you know, looking at the mask, and again, I don't know if I'm the one that like sort of suggested this, or if Stelfree suggested it because he was in the office next to me and he was looking over my shoulder, or if it was the two of us, you know, together. But I designed this sort of mask to have sort of a luchador kind of like a motif to it. And I don't know whether I did that without thinking about it. And then Brian said, "Hey, that's what that looks like." And I went, "Yeah, you're right. It does look like that. That was intentional." You know, or if I did that and he pointed out, or he, you know, said that was cool or whatever. I don't know. But it came from one of us who kind of said that, you know, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense with the character to have that sort of that cultural touchstone. And so the design that's been floating around the internet, you know, the turnaround that I did, that was actually the first drawing that I did.
Really?
Most of the elements, except for the chest graphic, which was Chiarello had asked me to do something that suggested the previous Blue Beetles, or the Ted Cord Blue Beetle. So I added the chest graphic like sort of after he said that. But the drawing that's there, minus that chest graphic, that was the first pass.
Wow.
That's it. That's what we want. And I was like, cool, you know, and they were like, by the way, you want to draw the book? And I was like, sure. And I jumped on with Keith and John, and we had a good time. As far as Duke Thomas, there was a pre-existing kind of a proto design that Greg Capullo had already done. So there was, you know, there were colors that were already kind of in play. There was kind of a basic, you know, like a shape to like his ears and that sort of thing that I kind of ran with. You know, that he had kind of like, it's almost like a motorcycle helmet that he was wearing. And so all I did was really on that design was kind of run with what Greg had done and maybe refine it. But the initial kind of like stab at like, you know, the distribution of color and kind of, you know, that whole thing came from Greg. So I basically just, you know, kind of retooled a few things on it and maybe gave it more of a you know, a refinement. But, you know, I would say it was kind of two of us that sort of came up with that design.
That's great. Thank you for the question. And
I'll answer a few more if you.
We have one more.
We got one more. It's, what's your favorite thing about drawing Blue Beetle?
I was going to say, is that a trick question? Because I know it was just fun. It was a different tone for me at the time, because at that point, like the first 10 years of my career was just doing DC stuff, right? It was just doing like you know, straight superhero kind of stuff. Right around the time, you know, like I you know, when I got past my first 10 years, that was when Red happened. And, you know, at that point I was doing a lot more kind of real worldy type stuff. Even though my stuff is kind of cartoony, I was doing stuff that was set in kind of like a, you know, people with guns, kind of like a more of a crime or espionage oriented type genres. Like, you know, a lot of the work that I did with Warren Ellis, from Red to Down, you know, that was all kind of like in that area. So when I got offered Blue Beetle, it was a chance to do something more like a Spider-Man, kind of like a fun thing that has got a kid element to it, and, you know, had some humor to it. and that was to me my favorite thing, was just being able to do a different tone. And it did, it didn't hurt that like John and Keith were both really funny people. I mean, anybody who knew Keith knows. I mean, you look at the work that he did. I mean, he was one of the best humor writers in comics. He was just personally a very funny person. John was a former stand-up comic. He already had that kind of like a dimension to his personality. So it just made for a different dynamic that I wasn't used to. So that was just, it was a good time, a lot of fun.
That's great. Thank you for the question, Henry.
Thank you. And Cully, you have survived this live cast.
So what are you working on? What are you working on right now that you've got to run back to? And
I am doing my first creator-owned book in a long time. I'm doing it with Greg Rucka. It's for Image Comics, and it's taken us a while to kind of get going on this, and a lot of that's due to me. But we're rolling on it now, and I don't know if I'm prepared to tell the title of it because we haven't announced it yet. But hopefully sooner rather than later, people will see it. If people like our work together on the question, they're going to like this.
And so will be a monthly or limited?
Yeah, it's a 5-issue series.
I see.
So the issues will come out monthly. They're not going to solicit this thing until I'm on the last issue of it.
Are you anywhere for Free Comic Book Day this year?
I am not. I am not doing that this year. I did sign a bunch of stuff for Austin Books and Comics that they're going to do like for door prizes and stuff. I went and did that for them last week. So
that's right.
So they're going to have stuff, but I've been not to get too into it, but I've had a month of being variously sick or injured, and I've just not produced enough work this month, so I need to basically stay at the table, which is why I'm going to go right back to work when I'm done here. I'm hoping maybe next year I could do Free Comic Book Day somewhere. So we'll see. So
what's your work day like now? Have you changed your hours, and have you changed your setup at all?
I'm still up fairly early. I usually get up around 7:30 or so. Get up, feed the dog, do all my, eat breakfast, all that kind of stuff, clean up. One thing that is probably different than when I first started is, I spend time the first part of the day, doing emails and house, like sort of general kind of office housekeeping and communications kind of stuff, checking in with people, answering, whatever somebody needs from me, that sort of thing. Usually working by about 9 or so. So it's but I mean, still to this day, it's like depending on the needs of the day, I might be done at 6. I might be done at midnight. It just, and it's just weird. Like, I'm 56 years old and I'm still doing this. I've sworn off all-nighters. I don't do those anymore because I can't do those because, that it comes out of the next day. So I've got to get some sleep. But yeah, it's like I have a long work day. I think that's pretty endemic to the business,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cully, go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just saying, I think usually by the time you get in your 50s, you stop doing the all-nighters. I'm 63, so I don't do any all-nighters now, but I did it up until about my mid-50s. I would still work.
Yeah, I was doing it up until just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is stupid. Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Why am I hurting myself in this way?
Yeah. And what would happen with me is it wouldn't be so bad the next day. It's the third day.
Oh, not for me.
The third day is when
it's the very next day for me. It's like if I'm up till 6 a.m. doing something, I'm like useless.
Yeah.
Because first off, I've got to get some sleep, and then if I try to start working in the middle of the day, I get no rhythm at all. Just can't do it. So I have to stop at some point and just go to bed and get a good 6 hours at least.
At least.
You know.
Yeah.
Just,
Now, do you have any warm-up routines? Like I know some artists. I remember like Gil Kane used to do sketches for an hour or two before he would start. You know, things like that.
I should, and there have been times in my life when I did, and I should go back to it because it does make things easier. Like there was a period there, like early 2000s, where I would do a commission every morning. Like, and the cool thing about that is you can sell a commission, right? Yeah. So it's nice little extra money. So I would come in, pick up Stealth Freeze. We'd come in and we would both do a commission from like 8 to 10, and do that. And then I would do a page, and I was on a good 4 to 5 page a week, schedule, pencils and inks.
Wow.
Not so much now. And maybe that's the reason why. Maybe I'm not warming up.
You just broke something right there, Mike.
Yeah.
Well, because what I always find interesting about these talks, yes, and then a lot of times I would do my wind down drawings after to kind of
see that is alien to me. The idea of wind down drawings, I'm like, that's just more work.
To me it's relaxing. But
to me, what's relaxing is actually like literally relaxing. Once I'm done with, once I finish the page and I scan it and I upload it, I'm like, I'm gonna go watch some bullshit on TV or something.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, I always sort of feel like when I'm working, especially on the strips, it's like you got to hit the mark.
Yeah.
Very highly focused. Everything's, you got to get it all boxed in. Everything's got to be just right. The act of drawing, just letting it, whatever's in, out, good, bad, whatever, is like unclenching the muscle. Because I feel like working on the strips or doing a comic job is you're more
I get it. Yeah. I can see, I sort of see the logic in that. I don't know. I tend to front load all that into the warm up part rather than the warm down. Like warm down, I'm usually I'm exhausted. I just want to eat something and like I said, watch some stupid TV show or something. But I don't know if I relax, period. I don't know. I don't play video games, anything like that. Like I read, but
I don't play video games anymore either. I did in my 30s and my early 40s a little bit, like Sega or whatever. Like, I see him and I go, well, that would be a really cool Star Wars game to have, but I don't have 4 hours a day to play a Star Wars game.
Yeah, see, there's that. It's like I don't have that kind of time, and it's like I struggle with making the deadlines so much that it's like every moment when I could be working, I'm either working or I'm stressing about the fact that I'm not working.
That's more relatable.
Like I feel guilty about lunch breaks, man. It's just so yeah, it's like if I have rarely taken vacations and usually feel like I shouldn't be taking a vacation. I should not be allowed this. Right. I think that's maybe
true.
I don't know.
It's true. It's we mark it down when you take a vacation. We mark it, goes on your permanent record. So how is your routine now that you're working for yourself? So you have the image deadline, and it's
harder in my opinion. It's harder. I don't know why it's harder, but it is. I think maybe because at least for me, it's like there's no track. If you're doing like a Superman story, you know what is required of a Superman story, but this we're kind of making it up as we go along, and it's just a different thing, and it's less scarier to me. And the thing that's weird is I don't know, when we did Red, that was also creator owned, and that seemed easier to me. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I just didn't think so much back then. But there's a lot of what do they call it? Analysis paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of that kind of stuff, but there's also like just wanting to take more care with something. And maybe when I do that, I kind of overdraw a little bit, So maybe I should kind of learn to back myself off of that. I don't know. It's like most of my favorite artists are so deceptively simple, and they like I want my work to be like that, and it's not. So it's like, I don't know. This is something Brian and I talk about all the time. It's like, why are we not like the people that we admire?
But simple, because people would say, you would look at, say, they always bring up someone like Alex Toth.
Sure.
But simple is a process. It's a design process.
Agreed. That's why I say deceptively simple. Mm-hmm. You look at somebody like Mignola, who's like one of my heroes. It's like his thought process into just shapes is really interesting to me, and his stuff is not based on detail really in any way, the way somebody like a Jeff Darrow or right. or Mike Golden or somebody like that, or Arthur Adams, but it's just different, and I don't know. I'm kind of in between that, and I probably I throw a little too much detail in some things that I probably shouldn't, and maybe should simplify a little bit when I do the next creator-owned stuff. Maybe I should kind of learn to back off a little bit. I don't know.
But see, you'd have to, again, if you're going to do that, you would have to allow yourself almost like a design phase to work on your design principles and design a style. Because I think Mike's style, if you look at it over the course of 30 years, you see him like cutting this off, cutting that off, doing things.
I wonder how conscious it is, though. I wonder how conscious it is, or whether it's just kind of evolutionary, because I don't ever think about style. I don't. And it's funny because when people come up to me and ask me about what my process is for the style that I'm doing, I'm like, there is none.
It just comes out.
I think style is what happens when you are not trying to have a style, right?
Yeah.
So I've had people come up to me last 10, 15 years and go, "Oh, that Leyendecker thing that you're doing," and I kind of at one point went, maybe it is. I don't know. I mean, I clearly I know who J.C. Leyendecker was. I've loved his work, but it's not, like people will talk about like the kind of way that I handle like spotting blacks. I usually do a little more work in spotting blacks than, a lot of people do. Like I'll kind of do this kind of like a side brush, kind of like a thing. Sometimes it denotes motion, sometimes it denotes form, and I don't really think too hard about it. It just kind of, that's just an approach that I don't really put a lot of detailed thought into, and it works, and it works for me, and maybe I'm sure that Leyendecker's in the soup somewhere, but it wasn't conscious.
Yeah, well, I see. That's what I'm saying. I think that like something like when you're not on deadline, you're not on script. There's a lot of things when you're on deadline that you do.
Sure. Yeah. Shortcuts, that sort of thing.
Right.
Sometimes, and I think that those are good. I mean, sometimes like, if you look at original pages of mine, sometimes you'll run across something where you'll see that I drew a lot more in blue pencil than I inked. And that's very often that's because, oh shit, man, I got to get this out the door. Let me figure out what to leave off here. And it's actually like a good thing.
Well, I noticed if you look at someone, again, an example of someone like Toth, you see some of his older work, you would see that he drew everything in. He drew the folds, and then he would just whack it in.
I do that too. A lot of times, like especially on faces, I draw a lot more than I ink. But then again, also my pencils are way, way looser than they ever were when I was, 30. I used to pencil so tight, like the pages would just scream. And like my pencils now are just barely there,
So you're doing more drawing when you ink.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm actually in some ways thinking it out while I'm inking.
That's a real evolution, I think, in process. Usually the process of most cartoonists is when you're younger, you're very detailed, and then you usually work to being looser as you get older. You especially see it in somebody like Kubert, who was always loose, but he was a lot looser as he got.
It's like I'm loose. It's like in the layout stage, I'm pretty tight. Like I usually figure it all out, like constructively, like the backgrounds and all that stuff, and the basic kind of like figure positions and the storytelling and all that stuff. Then when we get to the penciling part of it, that's very loose. That's very, very loose. It's just tightening up the structure a little bit, especially in doing faces and that sort of thing. And then inking is when I start to tighten up again. But even that, it's like the tightness tends to be in the backgrounds, not necessarily on the figures. But I mean, I've got a very, my inking style or whatever, I guess, things about it are very technical and things about it are less technical than they used to be. I don't know. I'm probably looser now than in the inking stage than I was 10 years ago. May not look that way, but
Are you willing to risk more, you think?
Yeah. But it's like I don't know if it is more of a risk because I'm better at being able to see the shot than I used to be. It ends up looking more like what I see in my head nowadays than it used to when I was, in year 10 than it is when I'm in year 35.
Well, I always say that because people will ask us, where do you get your ideas? And I always say that your imagination is like a muscle. If you use it, you get better at it. But you have to use it.
I like the answer, like when people ask you where you get your ideas. I don't remember who said this, but somebody said there was an idea service in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Harlan Ellison.
$50. It was Harlan Ellison. You send them $50 a week, and they send you like a 6-pack.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be habitual. I think that's that separates the amateur from the professional. The professional is habitual.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Emphasis on the bitch and habitual.
All right, let's let Cully go. We went over.
Yeah, my dog is complaining. I think she wants to go out, so
we're going over.
If he has to do an all-nighter, he'll be useless tomorrow.
That's true.
Cully, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
It was a real pleasure, guys.
We have to have you back.
Yeah, I would love to do this again sometime.
Yeah, when your book comes out, we'll have you back, and then you can show us some of your process.
Sold.
All right, let's make it so. I like it. All right, Cully, get out of here. We'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. We'll see you guys.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
So we have a couple minutes left. Thank you guys so much. I promised Cully I'd get him out of here. So sorry for the abrupt.
See, once they start talking, see,
you go on the podcast and you get talked at. That's what happens.
Mike, you have this kind of Columbo quality. It's like it's almost hey man, one more question.
One more question. Let me ask you.
It's so good
about your layouts.
So yeah, we don't usually get a chance to kind of debrief on air after somebody is just been on the show because we usually close out. But I'm really glad that we had Cully on. One is that he's like one of the unsung cartoonists in our business. We're lousy with those guys. It's like, you look at Cully, you kind of peel the orange, and you're like, oh shit, he did that. And, oh shit, he did that. And oh shit, I went to that movie that he did that. You know what I mean? But what I really loved about him talking about, even as a creator in this new world we live in, with Hollywood always knocking, or somebody being mad that you didn't get invited to your own movie premiere, that your voice is important and should be louder.
Right.
As a creator and a creative. So, kudos to him for standing up for himself.
Great.
Yeah, I think, the writers still today, when people talk about comics, the writers now still, I think it's probably because of Stan, because people think, when they think about comics, they think about Stan Lee. The average person, even the average person in Hollywood, if you say, name a person working, they go Stan Lee. You know, they don't know Ditko. They don't know Kirby. Also because those guys didn't have that kind of personality. They did not have face front true believer kind of personalities.
Right.
You know, you can't imagine Steve Ditko going face front true believer, you know. I mean, and that was Stan's gift, right? It was being able to do that and sort of be like the Disney, the ringmaster, you know. But we did that. We did that poll. It was last year, earlier this year, on my Facebook page, right? So, you know, name the cartoonist, name what you think the average person, and that's what it came down to. We figured most people knew Stan.
JAMAR NICHOLAS.
Maybe Sparky Schultz.
Right.
Joe Schultz. After that, people start getting real foggy.
Well, you know, here's an interesting thing about this, and I love this subject because I think even beyond personality, because I know a lot of bombastic personalities on the cartoonist side of it, but when you are, I guess, an extrovert, sometimes that works against you because you don't expect that from a cartoonist. And just even though this isn't exactly the same thing, take somebody like Seth MacFarlane, you know, as an animator. Everybody knows who Seth MacFarlane is because he makes you. You know what I'm saying? And that seems really weird to most people. Like, oh, I don't like that guy. He's greasy or he's on everything. Because, you know, that's that whole kind of thing where the artist is supposed to just be seen and not heard.
Well, I also think that he's different because since he does the voices and everything, he's like a personality, right? Like Stan, right? He has that kind of personality. Where Matt Groening's not doing any of the voices on The Simpsons. You know what I mean? He's not doing any of that stuff. He's not making TV shows. He's not trying to do that stuff, right? And so, but I think it is true that the average person also doesn't really know what a cartoonist does. Maybe in a foggy way because you don't see it. And whenever they usually show people in movies or wherever doing comics, they always show it wrong. It's always not shown correctly, you know.
Yeah, I saw that Spawn TV show. I saw Todd McFarlane introduce every one of those episodes in that kind of spooky Rod Serling kind of way.
Always hang out more of that.
Yeah, this is interesting. Let's talk on this real quick. What up, Scott Kurtz? Everybody knows the legendary Scott Kurtz hanging out in the chat. Scott says, you know, Stan was comics cheerleader, and I feel like a lot of where you going, Steve? The industry resented him for it, always accusing him of taking credit. Oh, nice with the skull flash, taking it back.
I don't think people resent Stan for that. I think people resent Stan because he was not he didn't share the limelight like he could have until sort of later when, you know, people were kind of riding on him. You know, I mean, he was just, you know, that's Hollywood, man. Nobody's going to give you anything if they don't have to. It's going to be about me. Man. You know,
people also have to decide which, you know, they want to pick sides, who is more important. Stan definitely took, you know, that Stan Lee Presents was every issue of Marvel's every Marvel comic Stan Lee Presents. And given that the Marvel writing method was so loose, leaving it to the cartoonist to basically riff, and then he would come in and do ADR at the end. I don't know. It was so much more collaborative than he let on.
Well, you had, to me, I always break it down to where you basically had Kirby and you had Ditko who invented things. And then you had guys who were great performers like Romita, Buscema, Colin, people like that, right? They were not the inventors in the way that Ditko Ditko and Kirby just needed an editor. They could actually make whole comics, create whole concepts by themselves, right? And once they left, Marvel no longer created stuff in the way that it did because Stan was not that kind of creator. You know, She-Hulk is not the same as Hulk.
But there was an alchemy then, right? Because I mean, none of them really, you know, had that kind of incredible run after that period, right? I mean, not to knock Speedball or I don't know, any of the indie Capital City comic stuff that Kirby did. I mean, it was still Kirby, but it didn't have that kind of.
Well, those are like third drawer to me concepts left over him. I think the thing is that this is just my opinion. I think once Ditko got burned, he was like, I'm never going to do that again. Kirby went to DC and he did stuff, and then he even came back to Marvel. He did the Eternals and stuff like that.
Right.
That was just the way he was as an artist. He was always spitting out ideas and concepts, right? I think Ditko was much more of a type of person where it's like, you burn me once, you're not going to burn me again, right? I think Kirby would have created stuff, probably was creating stuff right until he passed, because that was just like Mobius. You know, some people just have that brain that's just like on fire all the time with creativity. But I do think that somebody like Ditko was much more political.
Right. But I think getting what Scott was saying about Stan Lee is that I do think, you know, without Stan Lee, it just doesn't happen. You know, it's like the idea you can't remove him from the equation at all.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't remove if it had been Infantino, it would not have been as successful. That was his greatest gift, was being able to promote the business in a way that it had not been promoted before. Mm-hmm. You know, and you really don't have that now. You do not have that in comics, and comics is not as centralized as it was now. So you will probably never ever again have that kind of a personality like a Walt Disney, because everything is all spread out now. It's not, two main companies really. You know,
mm-hmm. It's very interesting.
You're not going to have like Image. There's not going to be like Todd McFarlane Presents on every single comic, right? It's a bunch of independent comics, and you'll have stuff that even Kirkman, who might be.
I was going to go there. Yeah.
Right. But do most people think of Robert Kirkman, or they just think of his properties?
Well, but could he introduce? Could he come out at the beginning of each episode of Invincible and introduce it?
But if he did, that's interesting. If he did, would that be goofy, or would that be like, oh wow, well that's cool. He's in front of his brand.
Will he come out in a trench coat, smoking a cigarette, or dressed up as a zombie,
like Robert Stack,
dressed up as a zombie, or like Kolchak or something?
I think it's an interesting question. Is like, will the modern reader receive that? Because I think everybody is so kind of like against everything these days. Even just to be in front of your own brand, it's kind of weird.
If it's sincere, I think that's really what it comes down to. If any put on, any affectation, I think is immediately sussed out and rejected. But I do think if that were honestly someone's personality, I think it's not a hat you could put on. I think it's got to be something real. Because as Carnival Barkery as Stanley might have come across, I don't think that was a put on. I think that.
Oh yeah. No, that's him.
He's He's P.T. Barnum. He's got that. Yeah.
Right. Which is what I was saying. If you look at the three main creators at Marvel, which was Stan, Ditko, and Kirby. Stan had that Carnival Barker cross with Walt Disney, P.T. Barnum personality. The other two guys, the most fundamental creative people, they did not have that kind of like outgoing of personality. Right. You know, as much as I love Jack, and it's fun to watch little interviews with him, you know, he was like a guy from the 30s, man, you know, and he was like, hey, why use guys kind of, you know, Stan may have been kind of cheesy, and he kind of knew that he was cheesy, and you knew that he was cheesy. So there's like that thing kind of going on, you know, where, you know, especially in the 70s, where he had like the 5 different kinds of Stan Lee hair, you know, he had the hip wave, you know, like Shatner with his toupees, you know.
How dare you? How dare you, sir?
He had that Gil Gerard cut.
Yeah. Yeah, he never got to that. Stan never got to that kind of puffy rug, the puffy rug Stan. You know, eventually he went to that, what we think of as the Stan Lee hair, you know. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's very interesting that we do not have, as a spokesman for the industry, we don't have anybody like Stan now.
I just think somebody rejected if you tried it now. In 2025, if all of a sudden tomorrow somebody shows up and goes, I'm Mr. Comics.
Well, see, the thing is he was.
They boo you off the stage, though.
Right. But, I mean, he legitimately was. Right? He could legitimately brag on that stuff because he was there, you know, in the creation of it, right?
Yeah.
Nobody else has that street cred.
I'm getting love in the chat for that Gil Gerard drop. So, yeah. Well, all right, guys, let's wrap it up. This was fun. Again, thank you so much to Cully Hamner for coming on. Thank you, Stanley. Yeah, thank you, Stanley. Mike, you gotta do a quick Stanley impression.
Good night, heroes.
That's great. Some rules for the road. Next week, we don't know who we're going to have on yet. You'll be the first person to know when we find that out. But also,
we have our agents out.
That's right.
Scouting.
Yeah, they're in the field. We have our field agents on the case. But I
just want to mention Free Comic Book Day before you do that.
Please do.
If folks don't know, Free Comic Book Day is Saturday. Go to your local comic book shop, get a free comic or two. Jamar, are you going to be anywhere?
Yeah, I will be returning to lovely Newark, Delaware. I will be appearing at Captain Blue Hen Comics in lovely Newark, Delaware. Go Blue Hens. What about you, Steve?
I was supposed to be at Cards, Comics, and Collectibles, but much like Cully, I am stuck at my desk working. So I believe Suze and Matt were going to be there. The Waringos were going to be there. I hate to miss it, but yeah, I'm usually there every year, but I just can't leave my desk right now.
I feel that.
Mike, how about you? Anything?
No, I haven't done it in a long time, and I'm at my desk too. I don't have the time. I don't even know where I would go now. I mean, I had done Captain Blue Hen for years, but I don't know what I would do now. But I will be making free comics that you can read in the newspaper.
Free Comic Book Day is every day.
That's right. Yeah. I will be. I'll be right here, working away.
That's awesome. And a plug for tomorrow, 9 p.m. EST. Coffee break with Jay and returns.
That doesn't look like you.
No, that's Jed Hirsch. Hold on, I gotta move this. Yeah, so that's
he's from Independence Day.
That's why Philly joke, Dear John, get it. So yes, so come back for more entertainment with your best friendly neighborhood poobah tomorrow, and that's our show, guys. Thank you so much. Come on, Scott, you gotta hang around more. I do this every week. So guys, thank you so much for your eyeballs and your interest. We can't do this without you. Thank you to the chat. The chat is lousy with professionals. It's lousy. The networking alone is worth you coming on live to watch this. So guys, we're at the end game. We all know that at this point. So I think it would behoove us before we all joined Steve Conley walking down the apocalyptic superhighway.
Tinkling on the side of the road. The endless tinkling.
To wash those curvy hands. Yeah. You think Stan Lee's going to do curvy hands?
No. Stan Lee hands.
Stan Lee hands. He would do it. Stan would do that. He would.
He did. Oh, it was so funny. You know that image of Stan Lee putting up the finger? Yeah. John Morris did that. That's so funny. Shout out to Calamity John Morris. What an early meme. So guys, thank you. Let's go home into that dark night. We'll see you tomorrow for a coffee break. Be good. Yeah, and read Leon. Oh, hold on. I did industry. It was industry. Yeah.